Hello, hello. Okay, so jury's still out. Do you think we are nearing sweater weather?
I would love to say we are, but we live in Southern California, and it's going to get us, I think, 2 or 3 more times. We're going to be all bundled up and get like a 90-degree day.
I know. We are dipping into the 80s this week, just a little bit. We're just dipping our toe in the water. But I made the mistake of right before our recording, I checked the weather app. By next, 6 days from now, we're back up to triple digits.
Yeah, that's one thing I guess here in Southern California we don't have what I would consider like a great fall. Like it goes from hot to winter. And even our winter is not cold. It's just different, right? But we don't have that fall, seasons changing, cool breezes. Right. It's very short for us. So
we have to pretend. I set my diffuser last night, which is in my kitchen, because I spend a lot of time in my kitchen. And I just went ahead and put in some fall scents, a little bit of clove, a little bit of cinnamon. So, let's just pretend for a minute,
do it.
Right?
We'll take it. I'll take it. That's right.
All right. Well, without further ado, who is this episode for?
You tell us.
Oh, I thought okay. So this episode is for anyone who has had that moment where they are wondering, is my spending out of control? Do I really have a sense of where my money is going? And so we're going to talk about how to develop a spending plan, why we call it a spending plan. We're going to talk about ways that you might be able to track your spending, and ultimately the goal being to arrive at financial freedom. So we spent some time preparing for this episode. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite topics, not because I like budgeting. I don't. And not because I like, talking about spending. That's not my favorite. My favorite part of this, the reason I like this is because I feel like people get so much freedom out of this discussion when we have it with our clients, when we talk with at presentations, we talk to folks. The idea that your spending should line up with your values, and it has nothing to do with shame or guilt or should, or my parents wouldn't like this, or the guy on TV told me this. Like, man, we have to work hard to take all that and just throw it out the window, to get some ownership, to say, this is my money. I can do whatever I want with it. And now from that blank slate to say, okay, now that I can do whatever I want with it, what do I want to do? What are my values? What do I want to spend my money on? The things that bring me joy, the things that care for my family, the things that build my future. Like, that's what we start to talk about. And that becomes a great, wonderful conversation. And it gets away from the shame and the guilt that some people carry.
And I would predicate this topic with an invitation to our listeners to really activate 2 things. One, to be more self-aware about the internal dialogue and the external dialogue they have when they're talking about their spending, the way they spend their money, a budget, investments, etc. And 2, to become an active listener. So to hear if they're managing their finances collaboratively with their partner, their spouse, anybody who's living in their home, right, or who they would consider to be independent, to practice that muscle of being an active listener and hearing what language are we hearing from that who we manage our finances with. I know for us, I managed my finances differently than when we got married. And then there was a season where we talked to get how are we going to manage our finances together. And as we've grown a family and changed jobs, gone back to school, there has been seasonality to the way and who is tasked, even between the 2 of us, with making sure that they're on the front lines of our spending, keeping things in line. Hey, this is a big topic that we need to discuss. And so there's emotions tied to our finances. We all know that, but sometimes we're not really self-aware that they exist until we hear our own dialogue, both what's going on inside of our head and that which we actually verbalize.
That's so good. I think you said that really well. I mean, we've had seasons where you have done all the budgeting, all the planning for our finances. We have seasons where I've done all the budgeting, I've done all the planning. And I think with that, even, I love that comment, you're exposing your own emotions in that. We've had times where, we'll look at a budget, a line item or something that we're spending and just feel we shouldn't be doing that, and having to, between the 2 of us, like, well, we talked about that. Didn't we want to do that? It's like, well, yeah, but I just feel like we're spending too much there. Well, why? And we kind of have been able to unearth each other's emotions to figure out, like, what was either the guilt or the shame or even the other priority that we had. That say, hey, this is setting back this other priority because we're spending on this item and I don't think it's valuable. And I like to comment too with the relationship of, you may have some different spending values than I might have. and that's okay. And as a household, we need to, consider that and build that in. And the biggest thing, and for our listeners, people we talk with in meetings, the biggest thing we talk about is knowing where the money's going and make sure it lines up with your values. The benefit of doing this budgeting exercise and going through all this is that you'll identify spots where it potentially isn't. Places where you're spending more than you thought you were or more than you want to, and you have the opportunity at that moment to reallocate that and say, hey, would I want a little bit of a raise into these other budgets by getting rid of this item, whether it's, I think at one time we had some, magazine and some other, subscription services that were running in the background. And once we identified those, we said, oh, we could just get rid of these and we could just take that money and put it elsewhere. And that was so valuable, I think, in our household.
Going into our Apple account, how many apps have we downloaded that you either downloaded a free trial that then automatically subscribes you to a year or a monthly subscription, or something like, I think I signed up for some sort of streaming service because I wanted to watch a specific program. And then I just kind of fell out of the habit of watching that program. I didn't realize that I was still being charged on a monthly basis. And this is something that happens all the time. We hear this from our clients. There is money being automatically withdrawn from your account that you're unaware of. And so sometimes it's not that initial decision was wrong. Maybe you did want the value that app was going to give you, but the fact that you're not even aware that it's still coming out of your account. The other thing that I think is so critical about talking about a spending plan is even between spouses, we can make purchase decisions or even the timeliness of when we're planning to spend money. I'll use Christmas shopping as an example. I truly am one of those people that I start thinking about holiday shopping in July and August and September. And I know that makes me sound like a crazy person to a lot of people, but I don't want to be doing all the shopping when it comes to November and December. That doesn't help me enjoy the season. So I like to do it ahead of time. And I have a lot of fall birthdays, so I just kind of double up. Well, you're not, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but you're not ready to talk about Christmas in July. But I need to expose that to you and why it's important to me, right? And I think that you could then agree, hey, I want a wife who's a little bit less stressed out between November and December because there's a lot going on. But it has to do with what's our credit card statement or our cash flow going to look like in July and August and September. So we're making a value-oriented decision about when we're going to spend that money, not if. That's a different discussion, how much we want to spend for the holidays, but when we're going to spend it too. And this is just getting into a habit as a couple about talking about these bigger things that impact your enjoyment. And, we talk a lot of couples about retirement. It may seem a long way away, or it may seem like it's coming up really quickly, but what's important to you during that next season? So.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think the reason we call this a spending plan and not just a budget is because it's meant to liberate some of these resources towards things that you value. And so one example for us, we have 4 kids, as most people know, and whenever we get out for a date night, man, that is, in my mind, money well spent. It's money where we can both get out of the house, we can go to a nice restaurant, we can sit down together, have a conversation together, and we have to be prudent of where we pick to go, but generally that money, in my mind, there's so much utility and value and purpose in that spending. So for us, that might be a higher budget line item than somebody else. They may say, well, yeah, I mean, every night's date night. We eat together all the time. Sure, that could be a value to them, but for us, getting away is a high value. The other thing that's really, I think, so resourceful about a spending plan is when someone first retires, they've spent the last 30, 40 years putting money into their retirement accounts. They've saved, they've been diligent, and now it comes the first few months they've retired, they start pulling out of their retirement accounts, and that feels really hard. And without a clear sense of what am I going to look like when I'm 90? How much money am I going to have in my 80s? Without a clear picture of that, someone who is 65, 70, they just retired, they're going to really, really struggle to say, yeah, I just pulled out 10 grand out of my retirement and I'm going to use it for this. And then next month I'll pull out 20 grand. I'm going to use it for that. And if they don't have a good plan, they're going to feel irresponsible. They're going to feel that they're spending too much. And it might not be both spouses. It might be that one spouse is fine with it and the other one is just biting their teeth or biting their fingers and just feeling like, what are we doing? But when you have a plan, when you have a spending plan, you say, no, we did the math. We know what our 90s and 80s look like. And we know that if we pull out 20 grand this month to do these things, that's well within our spending plan. It's well within our budget. And this is going to provide the life we want. And to me, that sort of confidence in your spending is so, so needed. So I think for anyone who's walking into retirement, this is probably, in my mind, the most important because you're probably not on a budget. You're probably not watching, how many coffees do I buy? But to say you need to have a plan for when and how you're going to spend this. But even pre-retirement, you're still building, you're still growing. This is such an important topic to be able to line up your spending with your values.
Yep, you might be saving for college education for your kids. You use the example of travel during retirement. I mean, I think some of the, I don't know if I want to use the word sad, but some of the really unfortunate scenarios are when a couple did not feel comfortable to withdraw from their retirement account. We understand that psychologically. You've been spending your whole life putting away and being prudent and being good stewards of working hard, and then you come into a season where you could have gone on that trip. And it would have cost $20,000 or more, a lot more money than you felt comfortable spending, and so you didn't. And so then you wait for 20 years, and now your health is just different. You're older. You probably don't want to be traveling in the same way that you could have been during that season. And that's a really unfortunate moment. And so we want to lean into this idea of financial freedom. Everybody's finances are different. That $20,000 trip may be out of the picture for some, but maybe a $5,000 trip or more. It adjusts. That's part of what I love about what we do, because we get to be a part of people's stories, and there's no cookie cutter solution here. Like, it is all different. So your spending plan is personal, but please don't invite shame and guilt to be a part of it. It should be, in an ideal world, a reflection of your values and the way that you derive enjoyment. We all work hard, right, for the money that we earn. And so there's an opportunity to enjoy that money that we've earned.
So well said. I love that. So getting a little more practical, that's kind of the philosophy of how we look at budgeting. There's a few, we're going to talk about some of the methods that people budget, and we're going to talk about some real resourceful tools. So people are going to have some tools as they go forward. So the first one is how people budget. For some folks, we just talked about is kind of that philosophical view of reflecting your values. For some people, they just get a blank piece of paper and they say, I appreciate eating. I appreciate living in a house. And they can just line out what they spend, and they can just start from a blank sheet. I'd say majority of people can't do that. Right. They want some sort of guiding light. And so there's a few, I guess I call them popular techniques of how to budget.
A rule of thumb.
Rule of thumb, yeah. There's the kind of the Gordon Ramsay. He's a very famous financial planner, and he's kind of has a lot of education materials. He does the envelope method. And it's kind of it's similar to the pay yourself first method. Is when you get your paycheck, you want to plop it up into special buckets, categories, envelopes, whatever it may be, and to say, this is how much I have for each category. And one of those categories in his method is savings. To say, this is the money I'm going to save. So you're kind of paying yourself first. The modern version, I would say, of that is people who do a direct deposit of their paycheck. They say, hey, I should have $200 left from every paycheck. I'm going to automatically, right when I get my paycheck, move that into a separate account. And that's my savings account. So they pay themselves first, their future self. And then the rest of the money, they've got to figure out how to live off of. So that's one method. I see we wrote down a few notes. That was the 50-30-30. Do you want to explain that one?
Well, it's just something that I looked up. Again, it kind of goes in line with that idea of a bucket or an envelope. So 50%, probably what they're looking at is like 50% are for your recurring expenses, your household expenses. Of those, we still try to tease out those that are fixed, like a fixed liability payment, aka your mortgage, your auto payment, that kind of thing. And then the variable expenditures. How much do you spend on eating out? How much do you spend on taking care of yourself, getting your hair done, your nails done, makeup, et cetera? Fixed and variable. But the recurring expenses that you anticipate, that would go into that first bucket, which would be the 50%. 30% is kind of your short-term savings or your emergency fund. And the other 30% would be like your long-term saving or investment plan for longer-term goals. So it relates to how you spend your money, liquidity, and time horizon as well.
Yeah. And that was probably, as the math there, it's probably the 50-30-20. I think might be a typo on that one, the 50-30.
Oh, you're right.
The 50-30-20. Yes, that's good. Totally. But the idea that you're putting some aside every month for future you, for long-term you, and that's a key one. And these are, rules of thumb. If you live in Southern California, where we do, rent and mortgages tend to be a larger percentage of your monthly spending. There's other parts of the country that could be worse. Other parts of the country where it's just a little different of how much you have to spend on rent and things like that.
And so there are averages. I like that you bring up that point. You can research averages for the state or the area that you live in. Cost of living is a real thing that's measured. And so when you want like a baseline, when you have this impression that you're like, wow, I am spending so much on owning a home in this area, or I'm going to spend, or I'm going to if I purchase this home, right? So I think researching what the cost of living is, where you're planning to live, you're going to be able to see some averages, so you kind of know ballpark.
Yep. And this is, as I guess, a freebie on the side. This is super great for people who are considering moving. You can go online and say, hey, I'm moving from this city to that city. And there's a number of resources. They use census data, but they'll tell you the cost of living adjustment to say, oh, you're going to be 10% more expensive just to live in that city compared to where you're at now.
Take a look at taxes.
Yeah.
Federal is what federal is, but state taxes do change.
Very different, right? All that stuff's really good to look at. So there's a few different ways to budget. The other one I like is zero-based budgeting, where every dollar has a job. And so whether the job is future self, whether it's food, whether it's fun and entertainment, every dollar you allocate somewhere. And some budgeting systems are backward looking. They say, what did I do? A lot of these that you'll find online are forward looking to say, hey, I just got paid. What am I going to do? And with apps now, I mean, we'll get into some apps in a moment. We're in a better age than ever, I feel like, to track some of this stuff. Like you can link a lot of your spending through credit cards or through online banks to some of these apps, and they'll track it for you. They'll send you alerts. There's one that we just started using that it has a little rings, kind of like the exercise rings on your phone, but it's budget rings, and it kind of has how much have you spent in each budget. So if you're about to buy movie tickets for something, you can look down at your phone quickly and say, oh, we only have $30 left in our entertainment budget, so we can't all go to the movies. That's not going to work. Let's find something else to do. Right. Man, that can be so useful in the moment.
So let's waste no time, because I think that is valuable. So we looked up some reviews of various budgeting apps that are out there. Now I'm going to preface this conversation with saying we used to personally, as well as we recommended to our clients, Mint. And that was a great budgeting software. We got a lot of value from Mint over the last several years. However, womp, womp, womp.
It's no more.
Mint is no more. May it rest in peace. Mint turned into Credit Karma, and currently my use of Credit Karma, it wasn't a really easy transition. So I think I would make that recommendation.
I think it's well kind of documented on the internet. If you look into this type of thing, that Credit Karma is a different purpose. Mint was a pretty robust budgeting software, which helped give people visibility, and Credit Karma doesn't do that the same way. So anyone who's interested, you can look through this stuff up. There's a lot of apps that people compare them to Mint. They say Mint was this. What's the next one? So let's run through a few. The first, I would say, is Monarch. Monarch is one that we started using personally. We're using a few of them right now to kind of test out which one's going to work the best for us. Not because we like budgeting, but I really like the visibility. It's like driving in your car, right? The speedometer, the oil.
Yeah, you just need to have some sort of, and we like to stay current on what apps are available because our clients regularly ask us. So.
What's up? So Monarch is a little more expensive than some of the other ones. It's also a little more robust. And so it's for folks who really want to get into an app and have some good visibility. There's a number of these we'll talk about. There's some that are free. There's some that are real simple. And it doesn't mean better or worse. It just means whatever fits for your life. Monarch, I'd say, is the larger. It does everything. It links with a lot. And if you're going to be in there, I expect someone who's going to pay for that is really building a budget, focusing on their budget. They're really into that. So I think that'd be a great kind of top of the line, premier level.
Yeah, I think it offers more automation features, so it should be kind of making your budget easier. It's real slick, and I was just going to comment on the price point. So Monarch is in line with another one we're going to review, YNAB, or that stands for You Need a Budget. So they're both current pricing as of today. It's like $14 a month or a special offer for $99 a year if you sign up for the whole year. The other one that's in this space that is similarly priced, a little bit less expensive, is this one that Jeremiah is going to review for. It's called Pocket Guard.
Oh, yeah.
But let me just compare in terms of pricing. Monarch and YNAB are similar, but You Need a Budget is a little bit more hands-on. So whereas Monarch is kind of known for its automation, You Need a Budget actually requires you to itemize each transaction. So it's like as if you were on a diet, and every time you went to go enter a food, you had to calculate the calories, enter it, put it in a specific folder, right? You needed to track every single expenditure and to kind of know where your spending is going.
And for some folks, that's a super useful exercise. For others, they're not looking to do that. They just want it to be done for them. And so it kind of depends what you need. Pocket Guard was one that I pulled down and was excited about that one of playing with it. And I'm still playing with it, looking at those. But I think it was one that it didn't have the integrations for everything that I was looking for. I wanted it to pull from our credit cards. I wanted to pull from our mortgage lender. I wanted it to automatically do that. I wanted to sort things. And it didn't do the sorting that I was hoping it would. And the big one for us, and there's probably a lot of people out there, is we have a line item in our budget that is just called Amazon. And we run a lot through Amazon, and we found that became kind of this spending black hole. And it really skewed a lot of our budget because, in Amazon, you have gifts for others. You have household, paper towels and things like that you might get. You had non-needed impulse buys. You had all sorts of things in there. And for us, we began doing with Mint is we would go in there. I say we, it was you initially, would break them out every week and say, okay, of our large amount we spent at Amazon, this was household goods. This was gifts for friends. This was, whatever it may be.
Clothing. This was similarly with Target too. Like I come home with that. Any store where you're buying things that are going to hit multiple different line items in your budget. That's really tricky.
And so Pocket Guard pulls that in, but it doesn't have any sort of integration with Amazon to be able to sort those for you. And there's one that we're going to talk about a little later that does. And that's what we're playing with right now because for us, for our family, that's a valuable resource for it to auto sort Amazon into various buckets, household, clothing, spending.
The other thing I'll say with Pocket Guard, a lot of these softwares that we're reviewing or these apps that we're reviewing, you can sign on for like a free trial just to check it out before you commit to paying for it, which we would recommend doing. But the Pocket Guard, the review that I was reading said the free version is actually pretty useless. It's not until you start paying the $8 a month that you actually get to see sort of the functionality of the app. But it is marketed to those who are brand new at budgeting. So it's more of a hands-off approach, but it's fairly simplistic, is my understanding.
And I think a great place for people to start. I mean, I like Pocket Guard. I like the interface. I think it'd be a really great one for people to jump into. But as you go, it might not be for everyone. And some about these fees, online, when you watch some of these reviews, people make a big deal about the cost of these, and they cost money, right? And I think there's a part of the commitment to actually use it. Part of that is if you're going to get yourself on track, spend the money, get going, like make this a habit in your life. And so I would not sweat on the cost of these. Long term, sure. If you don't need it or it's too much, don't use it. But I think initially, especially on a month to month, to get your life in order and get your spending under control, or at least you have visibility, so valuable for any of these. The next one I would say is Copilot. That's the one we're using right now, and that's the one that has an integration with Amazon. So Copilot is intended to be closer to Monarch, so it has a little more robust. It's automated, so it should be doing everything for you. And this one has an integration with Amazon. The negative that some people said, and I ran into a little bit, is it is a Apple-based product. So if you're using an iPhone or a Mac computer, it's great, it's slick. If you have a non-Apple products, they don't have a web version, they don't have a Windows version. And so that was one. So I
would imagine the developers are working on that.
I imagine they're working on it, but it's not there yet.
It's a really new app. So there were 2 free versions that we referenced. I want to bring those up for our listeners. Honeydew, Honeydew is a free with no built-in features or anything, fairly simplistic. Another one that's free is NerdWallet, offers a free, and it does automate your transaction history. So those might be 2 resources.
Yeah, and if I know well, I think NerdWallet is Excel-based. It's a spreadsheet that helps pull in. That's useful if people are comfortable with that. And Honeydew, that had some of the highest reviews for people who are in a household trying to share a budget. And so when there's 2 people that have separate finances, perhaps trying to share between the 2 of them, they've had good reviews for that one.
Yeah, or maybe are new, like they're just trying to form their habit of managing their finances together. Yeah. And then 2 that are often used, these are old ones, not new ones on the market, but for our business owners, I think generally they prefer to use something like Quicken or QuickBooks, and those are still really functional for
that's good
purposes. So.
Yeah, one piece I'll say is before we go, we've said this to a lot of our clients, there's a saying out there that you can't push a rope. If you're trying to say, hey, just do better, it doesn't usually get the results. But when you have a vision for your life, that rope can pull you along, go in the other direction. So if you set a vision, hey, I want to buy a house in 5 years. Hey, I want to be the type of people that our finances don't cause us stress. We know where our money's going. If that's you, well, then first you have to start with that vision of where you want to be. And then that can pull along your behavior. And as you're being pulled along, this budgeting, this spending plan, that's some of those resources to really get that in line with what your values are.
I love that. All right. Well, that wraps us up for this week. So remember that, our listeners, you can't push a rope, and good luck with tracking your spending. Thanks for listening. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit trichordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@trichordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show is produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Trichord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.